I'm going to break my own golden rule about sharing personal experiences like this with strangers online. But as the years advance, I feel it fading in my mind. So I wanted to record it somewhere where I can still recall at least some of the details. I took part in a lot of ghost hunts in my late teens and early 20s. 9 times out of 10, it would be a waste of an evening. Just sitting in the dark for hours and hours, becoming increasingly irritated at the rest of the group, jumping at their own shadows and screaming ghost if someone so much as squeaked out a fart. Woodchester Mansion, for example, is apparently one of the most haunted places in the UK, but all of its ghosts must have taken the night off when I was there. It didn't stop people from losing their proverbial shit-sugared almonds over every cold breeze, creak, and crack they encountered. I'm what you might call an open-minded skeptic. A belief that ghosts exist, but admit that no one really knows what they are, and accept that most evidence for them is either faked or has a perfectly mundane explanation that has been completely overlooked. I approach every one of my experiences from the critical angle that it's probably totally natural and nothing paranormal at all. With that being said, there are a few experiences that I haven't been able to explain, such as flashes of light in a corridor at Warwick Castle. It was dark, and I assumed that it was just someone taking photos with the flash on in an attempt to capture something, until one such flash occurred inches away from my face and devoid of an obvious source, or something pushing past my leg and growling, which was also at Warwick Castle, as I recall. Apparently, the token medium claimed it was the spirit of a child, but I'm skeptical of that. All I know is that it was a bit strange. The commandery in Worcester was my weirdest experience, though, by far, and it wasn't anything physical to be perceived either. It was more like an invasion on my mind by something else. Now, I'm well aware that there's probably some psychological explanation for this, and perhaps it was just a case of momentary schizophrenia or some other manic episode, but all I know is that it felt real. It was looking like another dud of a ghost hunt. Typical old building changing temperature noises, and not much else. But then, I went in with low expectations due to the fact that I'd never heard of the commandery before, and thus figured it couldn't be that haunted. I went in with zero knowledge, although I admit that that's only conscious knowledge, as who knows what we absorb from our surroundings subconsciously, and low expectations. I was with my ex-girlfriend too, who I was trying to impress and remove the ex bit, so I was somewhat distracted. And then it happened. While we were sitting in a dark room, a vision, no, a memory, of a woman being dragged backwards along the floorboards. I saw it from her perspective, her legs and shoes being pulled over the wood. In that moment, the way I perceived myself was as that woman, with dark hair and green eyes, and I felt total and utter sorrow and despair. Once the experience had passed, I was blubbering like a little girl, as in properly sobbing with a runny nose and everything. The strangest thing was that for a moment afterwards, I kept crying, even though all semblance of sadness had gone, like I was just going through the motions. It's a very weird thing remembering a memory that isn't yours. You have no context and an overwhelming sensation that this recollection doesn't belong and is entirely alien. Over time, it kind of naturalizes, I guess, as you give it context by associating it with the experience of obtaining it. And you sort of own it in the same way that you remember something that happened in the first person in a film or video game. But when you first experience it, that's something I just can't explain. I shared my experience with the organisers of the ghost hunt, and they said that it's not really public knowledge, but there was a woman who was regularly locked in the wall, presumably a kind of secret passageway sort of deal, as a punishment by her husband, that she was ultimately murdered by him, and that this has been commented on by their mediums previously. I'd take that with a hefty pinch of salt though, because encouraging stuff like this is undoubtedly good for their business. So there it is. I wouldn't call it evidence of the paranormal, and I certainly wouldn't use it to attempt to prove anything thereof, but it's certainly something very strange, supernatural or not. When I started my nursing career, I started as a CNA, Certified Nursing Assistant. I was working at a nursing home. I have a bunch of stories. Residents telling me to tell the little boy in a hat to leave their room. Call lights randomly going off, shadows, etc. However, this story really sticks out. Side note, when my gran was sick with cancer, she stayed at this nursing home for a couple weeks. So I went into one of my residents' room to help her get ready for the day. She asked me, Ashley, who died last night? I was like, no one, honey. Why would you think that? She replies, I saw a lady in a beautiful white dress and two men in a tuxedo pushing a gurney down the hallway. I figured she had a bad dream. So, anyways, later in the day when I'm doing my charting, I'm talking to one of the older nurses that has worked there forever. I tell her the conversation I had. She looks at me with this smirk on her face and she goes, You haven't heard? I was like, No, all puzzled. She tells me how there's a tuxedo downstairs in the laundry room and it's always moving. Like it will be in one place and then a different place a couple of hours or a couple of days later. I go home and I'm telling my mom about what happened. She looks at me with her jaw dropped as if she just saw a ghost herself. She goes, Oh my god, Ashley, Grandma used to always be like Donald. That's my grandfather. Tell those two men in suits to come in. They don't need to stand in my doorway. I get chills to this day. I moved to an apartment with my family 4 years ago, and ever since, I've been hearing things falling on the other side of the place. I don't know how to phrase it. If I'm in my bedroom, things fall and move on the living room and kitchen. If I'm there, things fall and move in the bedrooms. 2 years ago, my sister, who was 3 years old, told us about her friend that sat on my desk chair. I was disturbed because I usually found my chair moved from where I left it, and no one could have moved it because we all left in the mornings and I'm the first to arrive home. A couple of months ago, I was walking from the kitchen to the living room and I saw crystal clear how something dark and human shaped walked from my parents' bedroom to my grandmother's. I didn't pay much attention to it because I'm already used to this kind of stuff here. However, yesterday I was up late, when all this movement usually happens. I'm not trying to see or catch anything. I was in my bedroom when I heard some heavy walking. I tried to blame the upstairs neighbours, but the weight of the steps were more like some heavy presence than actual weight making the floor sound. I ignored that feeling and grabbed a pen in case there was a rat and had to kill it. I then opened my door only to see another dark and human-shaped figure walking through a hall that leads to the place where the loud noise came from. I totally froze because that thing was at least 2 meters tall. When I was able to move, I opened my grandmother's door and asked her, I woke her up, if she was in the kitchen. I think I asked because I was trying to explain what I just experienced and wasn't thinking straight. Today, my mother asked me what I saw and if it was the first time. I assume my grandma told her because she suspected my reasons for waking her up so late. When I was talking with my mother, she told me that if I ever saw that again, to tell her on the spot, because when she was taking some boxes out of the place where the noise came from, she felt some weird presence, and that she also heard things in there. I'm not really a big fan of paranormal things, and neither is my mother. So seeing this tall figure walking fast in there is just super scary for me. I wish I could buy and install cameras, but I can't afford them right now, and I'm wondering how it's going to be tonight, and if I'm going to see that thing again. I haven't told anyone this, and I haven't thought about it for years, but now I've been having horrible nightmares of being tortured, and pretty much just horrible things happening in my dreams, and it's been affecting my sanity, honestly. So this all started probably when I moved into the first house I can actually remember being in, when I was 6. I know when you're that young, you can have an overactive imagination, but I've never been like that, and it felt so real. So it started out small, like I'd have constant nightmares of demonic things that I can't describe much, but I remember it. Like I see it, but I can't describe it. It started escalating with feeling like I wasn't alone, and just constant paranoia that's probably not normal for a 6-year-old. The first actual experience I had that I saw was honestly the most horrifying thing I've ever seen. I was sitting and waiting for my mom and our roommates to get done with getting dressed so we could go out to eat. While I was sitting in the living room, I felt compelled to look towards the dining room like I had to. When I did, I saw this grey head poking out of the ground with an unnaturally wide smile, with basically shark teeth in its mouth, and it had long black hair and white eyes. Behind that thing was a tall shadow of a man with no head. They felt like separate entities, like the head felt like it meant me harm, and the shadow just felt sad. I know I'm probably sensitive to that stuff because I still pick up those types of energies. When I saw it, I snapped my head back forward and stayed as still as I could. I was terrified to move, and it felt like I was there for hours, even though it was like 20 minutes. Ever since I saw that thing, it got worse in the house. It started to sort of decay. Bugs started to live there, and it was so bad that exterminators couldn't get it to stop. One of my roommates, who I cared about deeply, just ended up randomly dying one night. Like there was nothing wrong with her or anything, and it hurt me so much. I don't suffer as much from it anymore since this happened 12 years ago, but I miss her so much. Things became so tense, like you could cut it with a knife, it was so bad. I had kittens, and they randomly died, even though they were in good health. After that, I started to wake up with scratches, and something would touch me occasionally that was very cold. I ended up moving out when I was 11 with my mom, because of reasons I will not say. And when I would walk by the house, it just had this aura of death. Things were fine for a while, until my mom passed away when I was 13. That's when things started again, when I moved in with my aunt. In my room at night, I'd see the shadow occasionally just in the corner of my room, and then it would randomly disappear. I had to move to another room and had a walk-in closet, and I was honestly afraid to go into it, because I'd feel something there and I'd see shadows in my mirrors. I ended up getting my room blessed because it was starting to affect my health. I had sleep paralysis for 2 months straight, and I became an insomniac from it, and I still am one somewhat to this day. From these experiences, I recently became a Christian, and I pray to try protecting myself. At first, it worsened my nightmares and left me physically drained when I'd wake up. I had lucid dreams of me being attacked, and I could feel it, and I had a dream of my mom dying in front of me. I've since strengthened my faith in God, and it has helped, but I still get nightmares every other night. But they aren't as bad, and it doesn't drain me anymore. I feel like this is the same thing that I saw when I was younger, and I think it attached to me. I've had many paranormal experiences in my life. Most of them I had in a house I lived in for about 6 years. This incident takes place when I was probably 19, so about 8 years ago. First, a very quick background to set the stage, and then I'll get on with the story. This house that I lived in was built in the very late 1800s, and was supposedly built on some sort of burial ground. I never had this claim actually proven, but with the things I experienced, I'm leaning towards believing it. I lived with 5 other people in this house, and they all have their own scary stories to tell. Let's get on with mine. If you've ever experienced the paranormal, or have been around active locations, you'll know what I'm talking about when I say that there is a certain feeling you get when a spirit or entity is close. It's hard to explain, but what I can say is, it's like your fight or flight instinct suddenly kicks in for no reason. The hair on the back of your neck stands up, or you get a tingle down your spine. This type of thing happened a lot while living in this house. Usually whatever it was didn't scare me. It was almost like we were cohabiting the space, and in a way, it became normal after a while. Until this one time. I was asked by one of the other people in the house to retrieve something from the upstairs. A purse, I think. The woman had mobility problems, so I or anyone else in the house tried to help her whenever possible. I went to go to the second floor, and it was like I hit a wall or something. Not a physical wall, but an invisible one. All of a sudden, about halfway up the stairs, the energy changed. I continued up, as this wasn't a rare thing to feel, but I also noticed it was different. It was menacing. It took me a few minutes to find the purse, and the whole time I felt this heaviness in my chest and a knot in my stomach. As I grabbed the purse, the energy spiked, and it was like I could feel something right behind me. It was like if I looked over my shoulder, I'd see someone directly behind me. It felt so close that if it was a person, I'd be able to feel their breath on my skin. As I turned to make my way back towards the stairs, I got this overwhelming feeling that whatever this thing was did not want me up there any longer. If I didn't hurry up, it was going to force me to leave. Now, this is usually where I lose people, or I get eye rolls. But stick with me. I promise this is true. I was exiting the room where I had gotten the purse and had just stepped on the top landing of the stairs, and an image flashed in my head. I see an old Native American man with a very wrinkled face and a traditional feather headdress. He was scowling and obviously angry. I knew at that moment he was the one making me feel unwelcome. I needed to get back downstairs fast, or he was going to push me down. I was in full flight mode at this point. I sprint down the stairs, almost tripping over my own feet in the process. My heart was pounding, and my adrenaline was pumping through my veins. I was terrified as one, I had never felt fear like this before in my life, and two, nothing in this house has ever made me feel threatened or in danger. I run back into the kitchen, and everyone at the table turns to me. My expression was to convey that something bad happened, because everyone frowned, and one person asked me what was wrong. I told them what had just happened, and they all believed me. It was just an accepted thing that this house had spirits, so it wasn't like I was talking crazy. At least not in our friend group, that is. The woman that I had gotten the purse for, who was also like the mother figure in the house, seemed to know what I was talking about. She told me later she wasn't surprised I experienced something like that, as she's had similar encounters. The next day, she gave me instructions on how to salt the perimeter of the house, and told me a small prayer to say as I was doing it. Does this actually work? I don't know. Regardless, it gave me some peace of mind, and I also never had another run-in with any malicious spirits. All in all, I'll always be thankful for the time I spent in that house. Even with and sometimes because of the occasional scary experience, the friends that I made and the memories I have were worth it. I used to think I was special as a kid, say 6 to 9 years old. I believed I could see ghosts, though never anything more than a glimpse or only for a few seconds. But I guess whatever I saw or imagined was enough to make me think I was special. And since whatever little I saw didn't hurt me, it surely meant I was extra special. So there I was back in my village in rural India, celebrating my 10th or 11th birthday, 2005 or 2006. Once the sweets were distributed, I and my cousin went up to the roof. Well, boys. Now, the thing to keep in mind is the house location. Imagine a T-shape. The lines are the streets where the horizontal line is the main streets, and nothing but farms at the top. The vertical line is the street running into the neighborhood, and our house is the space on the right of it. So there I was, sitting on the edge of the roof, facing the farms and chatting with my brother, with a clear view of anyone that would pass through those streets. And out of nowhere, I suddenly focus on these stripes of off-white cloth or plastic, seemingly stuck in the main dirt street, just swinging, as if being moved by wind. And so I try to ignore them and get back to our conversation. But now they're at the back of my mind and just moving in the corner of my eye because something about them seemed wrong. A few minutes pass by and I focus on them just to be sure, and sure enough, still swinging in the wind, straight upwards, taller. At this point, I do the same thing. I point and ask my cousin what he sees at that spot, and he sees all confused and says, "There's nothing." I reconfirm if he at least sees the off-white stripes, and he denies it again. So I try to ignore it again and just turn my back to the street and keep chatting. few minutes go by, and I couldn't help myself, so I look back to see if it's still there, and get shocked to see it's not only grown to like a height of what now I think was around 6 to 7 feet, but the number of stripes have multiplied. Now I've started to worry and panic, and so I ask if my cousin is seeing those ribbons or stripes now, and he gets annoyed and says there's absolutely nothing there. I'm beginning to scare him. All of a sudden, it kicks in. This is my thing, my special thing. Only I see it, and the panicking just goes away. I can see a new stripe burst from the ground, and maybe it's slowly growing, but a part of me still thinks maybe this is all wrong. Maybe I shouldn't look, and so I take a few steps back just so I can no longer see it, and hoping it will continue to grow and keep this weird moment going on. But just a few seconds after it was no longer in my vision, I heard the sound of footsteps and the strike of a staff on the ground. Now, the thing is, in North Indian villages, the villagers carry staffs as means of herding cattle, walking and fighting. So I instantly moved forward once again because the sound came just in front of me, and I had not heard anyone coming down the streets all this time. So it was just weird that someone was walking out there at night, and I looked to see who it might be, and if I would see the weird bush of stripes. All I saw was there was no more dancing ribbons. Just an old man walking with his staff and stopping right where the thing had been. Stop and look right at me and smile this big smile, as if he'd caught me and the fear came right back in. I could feel what I was looking at that was unlike me. It was just wrong, and so I rushed back out so we couldn't see each other. My breath was coming fast, and my cousin was worrying that I was doing, and all I was thinking was, this was big. I might die today, but this was big. All this time, the things I saw or imagined never cared about me, never tried to make any sort of contact, never felt so off and never so clear. This was truly special, and I was an idiot to step back. So I went back to the edge again to see it, but there was no one there anymore. I had a clear view of the streets for 30 to 50 meters, and that old man had just disappeared in the mere 5 or so seconds I had taken to rush back forward. My cousin at this point just walked downstairs, probably no more willing to stand by my crazy self, and not willing to test being out top or by myself. I followed him. A few minutes later, I told my parents and grandparents what I saw, and they apparently thought it was one of the ancestors who had come to bless me on my birthday. If it was indeed, so then all I got to say to the ancestor of mine needs to work on his damn entry. That's no way for any good spirit to show up on their predecessor's birthday. A couple of years go by, and I'm now in my first year of university, 2013/14. I no longer spend my time obsessing over paranormal things. Truth be told, I hadn't encountered anything since that night I met that old man. And since I'm being honest, I might as well tell you that I did spend a year or so curing him for stealing my special power. I came back for vacation, and since my family was in Andaman and Nicobar Islands at that time, we decided to do a 3-day tour to visit some of the places that we haven't seen yet. 2 days of driving through massive jungles, ferry rides and local tribals either asking for chips or threatening to put an arrow in us. Later, we decided to stay the night of the second day in the Forest Reserve guest house, close to the next day's spot. We reached it in the evening itself. The small, 2-storied building was on top of a hill, with no house around it for a kilometre or two, with a clear view of the ocean and the forest at the back. Lucky for us, since there was no one else staying and only one person on duty who stayed there itself to keep the place running, we had no problem getting the only suite they had, for no extra charge. By suite, I mean just 2 spacious rooms and a bathroom, but then the alternative was the normal rooms, just a room with a double bed and a small attached bathroom, which meant splitting up and staying in different rooms in this place that seemed so full of life at day, and now at night looked for what it truly was, an isolated building in the middle of nowhere. But you see, I was a hormonal fresher. I need my privacy after spending a day and a half of continuous family time. So I make a request that I wish to stay in a normal room, since I didn't wish to sleep in the same room as my sister. She kicks in a sleep, nor did I want to hold the bathroom for 30 minutes, while my whole family is right outside. And the caretaker was kind enough to put me in one of the rooms he had previously readied for us. Again, no extra charge. This guy could single-handedly ruin a business. The only thing is the suite was on the main floor, and the rooms were basically on the basement floor. Well, that wasn't going to stop me from busting a nut that night. A little info on the layout. The top floor has just 2 rooms. One a suite, and another an office with stairs in the middle back side. They open downstairs to this room with a dining table and 2 corridors running to your right and left once you get down, with rooms on each side. The caretaker shows me this room, and just right at the dining space. The moment you enter, you see a double bed, a TV at the front of it, an AC above the window to the left of the bed, and a washroom door to the right of the TV wall. Small room, but designed carefully to meet the requirements of a horny guy. But it felt off. I didn't know whether it was if the room had not been in use for so long that made me think something was wrong, or if it was at the dust or the clear fact that it felt a lot like the special thing at work. There was no one on the floor, just me. I ask the caretaker where he sleeps and he says, "I'm just next to you. You have any problems, I'll be there." And then he goes back to attend to his duties while I get in and lock the door and get ready for the night. I do the deed and spend the rest of the night just watching TV. And by the time I'm done, it's past 1 a.m. and I decide it's about time I slept off for tomorrow. It will be a long day. Now the thing about how I sleep is that I prefer it as dark as possible. I need all lights within the room switched off. The washroom door was shut and the heavy curtains long drawn closed before I even began to, And so I pulled my sheets and went to sleep on the side of the bed near to the main door. I'm not sure how long I was asleep, maybe 20 to 40 minutes, but all of a sudden I felt something big fall on the other side of the bed. Something heavy enough to shake it all and wake me right up. I frantically swung to see what it was. Did the frickin' fan fall off? Was it the ceiling coming down? Or I don't know, maybe a person just jumped on the bed and landed on their knees, because it sure felt that way. Now I was wide awake. I was sure it had felt like a person who jumped and landed on their knees. And all of a sudden, all those stupid things that I've seen in the movies came rushing to the front of my mind. Rule: if the ghost is not in front, it's probably right frickin' behind you. Do not turn around. So I'm stuck just staring at the window curtains right ahead thinking, I'm done for, and trying to see if I can make anything else in this almost pitch dark room, other than the curtains which are highlighted by the little amount of maybe moonlight outside. All the while, a sound in my mind doubts what I just experienced. Maybe it was a similar feeling to how one might feel they're drowning or falling in their sleep. Maybe I experienced something similar, and maybe I imagined the sound of the bed moving or something. Or it made the sound because I moved, and not that I moved it, because it moved and made the sound. Simple logic stuff. As I stared at those heavy curtains, a wave just moves through them, slowly. Might have been the AC. Is it in the swing mode? Could be strong enough to move those curtains. They felt heavy. Strong AC. So I once again do the same thing. I don't look anywhere else in the room, especially right behind me. I just pull my sheets up and just try to fall back asleep. Or I try to, but it no longer feels right as it did. Heck, it feels the way it felt when I entered it. Just off. As if something was wrong, and now something was staring, just waiting to see my next move. My mind has already gone through the encounter with the old man, and I thought this is just another major event. Maybe these are the only things I can feel now. Maybe if I just wait it out, I'll walk out of this just as easily as with the old man thing. I just laid there, not moving a muscle, for maybe 5 to 10 minutes, until I heard noise in the corridor and thought, the caretaker, he said he was next to me. Next room? The one in front of mine or the one after mine? Let's just go out into the light and then go to this room. So I slowly start turning and peek out of my covers and look to the door and realize no light was breaking in through the bottom or edges of the door. The lights were bloody off in the corridor. Fuck, whoever was trying to save electricity at this point of time. But my mind was set. I needed to get out of this room. I would slowly get up and walk to the door and turn on buttons right to left, and then walk out to do the same with the corridor lights. Surely the switches to it would be around my room. Rule: when getting out of the bed, ensure a minimum landing distance of at least 2 feet from the bed, to ensure that you have at least a second to maybe scream as you see something pull you under. So, I'm very casual. Jump, not get out. No, sir, I leap out. All the while acting as if it was the most casual thing to do, and very calmly turn on the switch. It doesn't work. Check. I won't lie. I just froze. It didn't work. I didn't want to be special anymore. But an impulse in me was shouting me to get out of this room. Don't look back. Don't think. Don't give in to despair. Just keep moving. So I very casually opened the main door with the single aim of going upstairs to the suite and just crashing in. Fuck the caretaker. I opened the door and looked to the stairs and all the lights are off upstairs. It was just dark in and out. Check. As if fate itself was mocking me. You're comfortable in the dark, right? Have it. But now all I wanted was light. Just something to show me what was around me. As I was finding out, not knowing what to be wary or afraid of only amplifies the fear that you feel in that moment. Back then when I had met that old man, I always had something to look at. Something that was the very symbol of what I needed to be afraid of. But now, it just felt everywhere but nowhere to be seen. I was standing with my back to the wall after having closed the door behind me. I was no longer going to risk walking up those stairs, which I could barely see. I needed to find the light switches for the floor and find that frickin' caretaker. So I started sliding towards the end of my corridor to the room next to mine, with my back to the wall so I could see most of the corridor. The door is locked, so I started banging, hoping it was locked from the inside and he would wake up. I call for him. I keep banging the door harder and harder. Maybe the ruckus would wake him up, even if he is in another room, all the while trying to keep my eye on the length of the corridor. No one opens any doors. No one comes. But it's fine. Probably a deep sleeper. My roommate was one. Weird guy, honestly. I tried waking him up multiple times, but nothing ever worked. Not even slaps. And then I found a trick. Call his phone, and the bastard would wake up with a jump. Imagine waking up 2 semesters with the sole purpose of giving a missed call to your roommate, who's lying on the other side of the room, before his army of alarms go off. And you have to get up to turn them off, because God knows they don't work on him. College life is weird. Anyway, back to the story. So I keep moving forward to the next room. Same ending. Now, I'm almost at the edge of the corridor, thinking maybe there were stairs this way too. All I found was just 2 openings on either side from which you can walk into the forest. The last thing I was going to do in this situation was walk into a bloody forest. Now, I had to go all the way back, banging on each door on the other side till the time I reached the room right opposite of mine. All the while looking for a switchboard that was not one in this freaking corridor. Logic said it was probably in the dining area, and I should have probably checked that first, rather than walk around in freaking dark. So I do exactly that, all the while keeping maximum distance from my own room door. No switchboard. How is there no switchboard? I have to do something. I can walk towards the other corridor. Maybe the caretaker would be there. Maybe the board is towards that side. Maybe I've had enough. Yes, I have had enough. You see, you can only be afraid for so long. I spent the last maybe 10 minutes slowly walking in a silent dark corridor, with my butthole clenched so tight that the phase vacuum tight seemed silly in front of it. I was done being afraid, damn it. It's been 10 frickin' minutes of absolutely nothing. I was definitely not risking the stairs, but fuck it. If I lose to something that I can't even fucking see, why am I so afraid? This is nothing new. I already had one experience, and heck, I looked it in the fucking eyes. I'm going in that room. I'll see why the light didn't work. Probably didn't hit the right switch, even though I'm pretty sure I hit them all. I would just turn the washroom light on. Yes, turn the fucking lights on. Get in the fucking bed. Just lay there, come what fucking may. And so I make my way to the room. Fucking keep eye around you. Screw whatever would come behind me. I'm going in. I reach the damn door and push it open. And what I see freezes me dead cold. The washroom door is open. The washroom light is on. Check. You see, I no longer doubted that I was going to die at any moment back then. I had not frozen because I was scared of my mind. No, sir. I had just accepted that I wasn't the one in control. I accepted at that moment that this is beyond me. I accepted the finality of the moment. I stood there well aware that I was at somebody else's mercy. You see, I could explain the feeling of someone falling on the bed as a thing of my mind. I dreamed it up. Top-notch work there, subconscious. I could explain the slow wave in the curtain as the AC swinging and being strong enough to lift those curtains. I could explain the light not turning on as maybe a fault or just not me hitting the right key. I would reason and explain that to you and myself. But how do I explain this? How do I explain the bolt on the washroom door unlocking? How do I explain the lights in it turning on when the switchboard for it was next to the bathroom door? Mind you, a place I had not even come close during this incident. It felt like it was mocking me. Look you like your surroundings are dark. Well, I feel at home now. What now you think lights is where safety is? Okay, there you go. I'll turn it on. Not you. I will do it. Come in. Look, it's safe. The lights are on. It was then I understood what it means to have laughter in the air. Crueler than anything I'd experienced. Testing me. Toying with me. At that moment, I was sure if I went in, whatever may walk out later will not be the same as the me that went in. I still don't remember how, but I ran in silence. The fear that had kept aside in the face of something far beyond my understanding had returned roaring, and I turned around having given up to whatever may come next, and I ran in that dark corridor, up those dark stairs, through the pitch-black darkness that lay upstairs to the suite. The blood pumping in the ears so loud, I heard nothing but the sound of my own scared heart, and I banged that suite's door, never letting my eyes wander off of it, just praying that at least this one would open. There were no tears in my eyes, no panic in the moment, just me standing there banging robotically at the door, with fear coursing through my very soul. And it opened. My dad stood there looking slightly mad and asked me why I, a grown-ass guy, would so loudly be banging on their door at an ungodly hour. And I had to say, mosquitoes. The room had too many mosquitoes and they wouldn't let me sleep. I spent the night awake, just laying in the corner of the bed I now shared with my sister, hoping whatever it was would no longer disturb me now. And as I lay there completely alert and as the morning came, we started to pack for the rest of the trip. The breakfast was served in the dining hall downstairs by the caretaker. The switchboard had been right at the start of my corridor. The caretaker handed me the cell phone I had left next to my bed last night. It never came to me to check for me, when it was the very device I had used for recreational purposes in the very early hours in that room. He served the food and walked into the room right opposite of mine. The one he had apparently stayed in. The one I had banged last in my corridor. He never asked me why I left the room door open with the AC running and the washroom lights on. I never asked him why he never opened his door. Breakfast done and bags packed, we left, and I never told anyone this story for 2 years. Always afraid if it would bring something bad. I finally cracked and first told my dad. He didn't know how to react or help. I still don't, so I don't hold him down for this reaction. Later on, I would tell the story one more time to my friends in college, and no more. No more until now. When I was 15, it was the first time anything paranormal happened to me at this boarding school. For a month, I would have sleep paralysis. The next month it got 10 times worse. As well as sleep paralysis, I would feel someone or something patting my head, I'd open my eyes and no one was there. This would carry on for a little while, until one night when I had sleep paralysis again, and I looked over to the other side of the room and saw a maid would carry on for a little while, until one night when I had sleep paralysis again, and I looked over to the side of the room and saw slightly washed, wearing a maid's costume. This happened for a couple of nights, until I left that school. I came back to that school again for sixth form, the last 2 years of high, if you're American. It all started up again, and I was moved into that dorm again, but this time, she followed me around the school. In the end, I prayed for her. However, she still follows me around when I wear a certain necklace to this day. The last story I have is about an 18-year-old me messing about with a Ouija board. Please don't mess with one. So my boyfriend at the time bought a Ouija board. A good friend had just died a couple of months ago. We messed around with it for a while, until the planchette started to levitate. I somehow went into a trance-like state for what felt like 30 seconds. However, I got told it was for 5 minutes. When I got out of this trance-like state, I had 3 scratches down my arm. The hand with the scratches was red hot to touch, the other one ice cold. Of course, we decided to do it again the next night this time. Something predicted the future. The first thing it said was fire alarm. The next thing was knee surgery, and the last one was asylum. As soon as it happened, the fire alarm went off, and a year later, I had knee surgery. Then 6 months later, my ex was admitted to a mental facility. I know it sounds far-fetched, but this is what happened. Again, please don't mess with a Ouija board. A while back, my ex/mother of my child told me about this guy who she had summer flings with. She said he was always looking out for her, but they were never official as he came and went due to his job. One night, she gets a call from him around 3 in the morning, and he was crying and apologising to her, saying that he was sorry and he fucked up. She didn't understand the context of what he was saying because he didn't make a lot of sense, and she was just waking up from her sleep. The phone clicked, and she figured his phone died and that he was probably just making a drunk phone call, and went back to sleep. Following morning, she got a phone call from his parents saying he died in a car accident. Got T-boned by a semi-truck in California. She was the last person he talked to before the crash. Years later, she had a kid with someone else, and we conceived our child together, so she moved in with me. During the time we lived together, we were butting heads constantly, and we were having a hard time seeing eye to eye. One night, I was inside the bathroom, and she was by the bathroom door, and as we were arguing, I heard the blinds rattle. Keep in mind that the window was closed, so it wasn't the wind that caused it. I went to go look to see what it was, but nothing fell on it either. It was as if someone ran their fingers down the blinds, but no one was there. She claimed it was the guy and he was watching over her. I was startled at first, but brushed it off. As our relationship progressively got worse, me and her were living in the same house, but we lived in separate rooms. She had a baby gate set up upstairs in case one of the kids decided to walk out in the middle of the night. One night, we were arguing after I came home from work, and I told her I didn't want to keep doing this anymore, and I went to my room and closed the door. In the middle of the night, I heard the baby gate alarm go off for the first time, and I figured her older kid might have woken up to go get water or something. He was about 3, maybe 4 years old at the time. I was exhausted from working 10 plus hours the day before, and I had to wake up to go back to work the following morning, so I didn't go out to check. The alarm kept going for about 5 minutes before I finally heard it click. I figured the mother finally got out of bed and got to the gate and went back to sleep. The following morning, I woke up and got ready for work, and as I was walking down the stairs, I saw her coming through the front door. I was surprised she got up early to go somewhere, so I asked her where she went. "Where are you coming back from?" I asked. "Coming back from my dad's place. I spent the night over there." I was confused. "You weren't here last night?" "No, I left after the argument. I just didn't feel like spending a night here yesterday." Her dad lived 2 streets up from where I lived, so it was close.
But it surprised me, as I thought her kid woke up and opened the gate. I explained to her about the gate incident, and she just giggled, saying it's probably the guy that's just bullying me and telling me to watch out. One thing I wanted to make note here is that the baby gate isn't like a swinging door where you can just push it open. You have to unlock the latch from the top and then pull it up and then it will swing open, meaning it wasn't just some defect or the AC that can cause it to open and close, like a draft closing the door. I thought about the latch closing and hearing it click in my head all day, and it gives me chills. He would make his presence known only when we got in a heated argument. Another time, he was shaking my bed as I was trying to sleep and kept at it for about 20 minutes before he finally stopped. Second time, which happened a few weeks later, I had a long day at work. Came home and had another argument, and he started shaking my bed again. I was really fed up at this point, so I yelled, "Stop!" And he did. She eventually moved out and found a nice guy, and she's married now with 4 kids. We're on better terms, and I haven't had any encounters with him since. I was afraid after she moved out he might come bugging me again, but he never did, and I hope to keep it that way. The first instance I remember was when I was new staff. I was doing a close down by myself at around 2 am, which is very early considering we open till 6 am. And I was one of 2 people in the building. The other person was a manager who was cashing up downstairs. It was just us 2, and I was slightly on edge because something didn't feel right. I'm going to try and explain how the club is set out so it makes more sense. The way the nightclub is set out is in a shape. There are some booths near the main door on one of the sides, along with the female toilets. Across the middle section is some seating and tables, and the bar across the wall. The other section was more booths, the men's toilets, and then a door to the smoking area. Behind the bar, there's a door that leads down a corridor. If you go straight, there's a fire exit door that's basically used as the staff's smoking area and bin area. And if you turn right, it takes you downstairs to the cellar, which is where the stock and offices are. I was walking near the customer smoking area, sweeping as I went, and I heard glasses clinking near the entrance to the club. I'd gone round the corner, and I could hear it, but the lights were flickering in the booths near the female toilets. Of course, I was absolutely shitting myself, because I was the only one upstairs. I'd rang my manager who was downstairs to tell her what was going on, and she said it gets weird in there sometimes. As she said, the bar mats I'd hung on the entrance to, behind the bar, flew off and slapped on the floor. Naturally, I went downstairs to ask what the fuck was going on. She said the best thing to do is just tell the spirits to leave me alone, and they will. I thought it sounded like bullshit, but I gave it a go anyway, and it seemed to work. The next few incidents have all been very recent, because I started doing the opens, so I was the only staff member in the entire building. There were times I'd be downstairs in the office, and all the lights would just turn off and flicker. Things would randomly fall from a spot they haven't been moved from or touched. You'd feel the air change sometimes for seemingly no reason, and I usually yell something along the lines of, "Fuck off, Satan, not today," and it'll stop. I ignore it as best I can, but the scariest one I've had is when the motion sensor light had turned on in the staff smoking area. I had the door pinned open because it was warm, and a figure walked past. I didn't really know what to do at all. It gets very scary sometimes. It used to be a pub before it was bought out, and spirits haunt their favourite locations from what I've been told, so I suppose that explains it. Some background context. 6 or 7 years ago, my family had a family reunion, and my cousins decided to rent a beach house because, why not? When my family and all my cousins arrived at the beach house, we all unpacked our stuff, and I went upstairs because that's where all my cousins were. There were about 5 of us in the room from what I remember. We were, I guess you could say, we were the youngest cousins at the time. I was 10, and the youngest in that room was 4. Probably 15 to 20 minutes later, the door opened on its own. Keep in mind, the door was closed all the way. There was absolutely no wind, and we were the only ones upstairs. I got up and closed the door, not questioning anything, then continued to play with my cousins. The door opened again a few more times. The sixth time it happened, I opened the door, and I don't know what I was expecting, but I was pretty stupid when I was 10. I whispered, "If you're angry, grab my hand." Then I stuck out my arm. Believe it or not, I felt a tug. I was a little spooked. I just closed the door again and continued playing. It didn't open again. Around 7 p.m, my uncle came out of the bathroom and asked, "Was there any wind?" Because the fucking mirror was swaying. We all looked at each other. We told them that there was no wind and we just shook it off. When we all went to bed, I woke up at around 1 in the morning. I looked at the window and there was a shadow figure. Everyone was asleep. I blinked and it wasn't there anymore. I turned back and my brother, who was only 1 at the time, was sitting up looking at the stairs. I was trying to see what he was looking at, and I saw the same shadow figure looking at him. I pulled my brother down into the bed and made him face me. We both fell asleep afterwards. We woke up and I told everyone. They were all in shock. Then my mother asked, "Wait, was everyone sleeping?" Because I heard people playing mahjong around that time. I was confused because nobody was up. I told her nobody was up. We decided to leave a day early because we were all a little spooked. Before we left, one of my older cousins, he's a psychic medium, was drawn to this one place as if someone was telling him to go there. He went into the house asking everyone for a shovel. I don't remember how he got the shovel, but I followed him and saw him dig in this area by the house. What he dug up was a grave. If I had to assume, the house was built over a graveyard. We covered it with leaves, coconuts and flowers. We left afterwards, but still, I think something followed me home from that. When I was 11, I noticed a lot of things happening around me. I noticed that the lights in my room would turn on and off at the most random times, like 4 in the morning. Another thing is, I would hear voices calling out for me and just a lot of paranormal activity in general. But I remember this one night in particular. I woke up at around 2 to 4 a.m. This isn't really usual for me. If I wake up randomly, that usually means something is watching me. Does anyone else have that too? I tried to go back to sleep, but I couldn't. I sit up and look to my left. There was a tall shadow figure staring at me. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I quickly turned my head forward and there was a shadow figure that looked like a girl. And behind her was another, taller and skinnier shadow figure. I looked away and looked at my mirror. I was in shock. I counted around 6 to 7 shadow figures looking at me. Then finally, I started to panic and yelled for my parents. When I did that, all the shadow figures stayed until my parents entered the room. I explained everything to my parents, but they didn't believe me. I went to their room and slept there for the night. Now, I don't see any of those shadow figures today, but at times I would see a shadow figure by the hallway. I honestly don't know what to do. Does anyone else have a similar experience? And what should I do? Because similar things still happen. I live on the island of Oahu, specifically in an area where supposedly royalty or any important person came here to drink water and stuff. Where my house is located, there's a forest behind my house. Nothing special about it, just some plants my grandma planted really. A couple years ago, probably back in 2018, I woke up at around 3 in the morning to see the sounds of drums and people chanting. I look out of my window. If I look out the window, I see the forest. I saw around 5 to 6 figures. One was looking at my window, and the rest were walking around in a circle. I was a bit startled, but I drifted off to bed again. I woke up and went to my backyard. I went to the forest and I heard rustling in the bushes. I thought it was some type of animal, but it was a shadow figure looking at me. When I saw it, it disappeared out of thin air. The energy felt very uneasy there, but I saw a cool looking rock and I took it home. I'm not sure if any of you guys heard of the saying, don't take rocks from Hawaii back home, but it's a usual saying here because supposedly Hawaiians did rituals on the rocks and they were cursed. I did think about it a lot since it was close to my house. Ever since I took that rock, I would hear this voice saying my name, constantly banging on my windows, growls here and there, and one time I got a scratch mark on my back. I took the rock back outside, but this time, before I entered the forest, I said this Hawaiian chant to basically say my presence is welcomed, and I mean no harm. I dropped the rock where I found it and left. The activity that happened after I got the rock stopped, and I returned the rock. Here and there, I do still have some activity, but it isn't as bad as the time I took the rock home. I'm still not sure if this was something demonic, or a Hawaiian ghost or curse. I live in a shitty apartment in a shitty North Texas town, which has been normal overall during the year and a half that I've lived in this shoebox. However, in the past month, give or take, things have gotten extremely weird, and they just seem to be getting worse. It all started with my husband being home alone, while all of my neighbours and I were down the street hanging out. Nobody upstairs, next door, or across the hall. No one was home. All of a sudden, he hears someone wailing, absolutely sobbing, which he suspects to be me. Upon getting up to check it out, he stops in front of the bathroom and the sound is deafening. The light is on, which we always turn off as no one is in there. He opens the door, nobody there. When I come home, he's pretty shaken up. Not long after this, I'm laying in bed in a dead sleep. Out of nowhere, there's a deep voice right in my ear. I couldn't make out what it said, but I was very awake after that. Some time passes, and my husband and I are about to leave to grab a bite to eat. I close our bedroom door, to which my husband mentions that one of our dogs is sleeping in there. I open the door and we leave. It's important to mention that our bedroom door opens into our room and directly into a wall, on top of the fact that this door is a bitch to open and close. It doesn't swing shut, only open. We come home and the dog is shut in our bedroom. My husband looks at me. Didn't you leave the door open? There was no reason for it to be closed. Now we skip to the past week, where everything is really intense and I'm seeing things regularly. I stayed with my best friend for 4 days. Day 1. I was sleeping on the couch and I woke up in the middle of the night. I look up trying to find the time, but instead, I see a grey silhouette of a head. The second I looked, it ducked down behind the couch. I said, fuck that, and went back to sleep. Day 2. We had just gotten back from swimming at the lake, and I was in the shower. My friend's house is very small, so you can hear anything from just about anywhere in the house. The bathroom is at the end of a short hall, which immediately connects to the living room, where everyone else was. Whilst being in the shower, I hear someone stamping around in the hall, messing with the cabinets. I figure someone is just looking for something. No big deal. That is, until the bathroom door opens for a split second and slams shut. I figure that my friends are just trying to play a prank on me, so I finish my shower and call for my best friend, asking her if anyone was in the hall while I was cleaning up. She tells me no, that everyone was sitting in the living room, but then asks me if I had been messing with the TV. I have the Roku app on my phone. I tell her no, my music had been on the whole time, and I wouldn't want to get my phone wet to begin with. She then tells me the TV had been turning itself on and off, on and off, on and off. We talk about it for a minute, and she tells me she never heard anything in the hall, despite how loud it was for me. I hear shuffling in the front room for the better part of the day after that, but of course, no one was there. Day 3, again in the middle of the night, I wake up. I check the back of the couch first. Nothing there. That is, until I look a little further into the doorway to the hall. There's a white face close to the top of the door frame, but the second I could comprehend it, it was gone. Nothing really happened on day 4, thankfully. It wasn't until the morning of Friday that things immediately kicked off. I was laying in bed with my husband, him being semi-awake and me being wide awake. I stared at the ceiling for a while, just resting, when all of a sudden there's a small ball of light that floats across my ceiling and disappears. I sit there in awe for a moment before looking at my husband and explaining to him what I saw something. He opens his eyes and looks at me. What was that light? All of our lights were off, and we had our window fully covered with blackout curtains. There was no logical reasoning behind the strange orb of light. Skip several hours later, it's somewhere between 10 to 11 pm. I'm sitting outside with my neighbours, right outside of our hall, when one of them gets startled. I swear to God I just saw someone right on the corner of the building. There's nothing there, I literally just saw it. One of my other neighbours and I get up and check, him going around directly to said corner, and me going the opposite direction, meeting in the middle. There was indeed nothing there. Said spooked neighbour went home a little after 11, and I was chattering and giggling with my other neighbours. When I look back, very, very briefly, I see it. All I could make out in that second was an arm and legs, all pitch black. I whipped my head back around to look again, but there was nothing. I'm a little shaken. Cut to this morning, I'm walking my dogs. As I'm walking my largest dog, she's very clearly upset about something as we get to a certain point down the sidewalk. She starts staring intensely at something I cannot see, in a very empty space. If anything were there, I would have seen it. I give her a little tug, and when she turns to face me, she's drooling all over the place, which she hasn't done since she'd started living comfortably. She was a street dog for 7 or 8 years before I had moved in. I bring her inside and walk my other 2 dogs, who seem just fine. As I'm walking them though, I meander past many empty cars in our parking lot. Out of the corner of my eye, I see someone sitting in the driver's seat. It happened twice, each time in different cars, and both times I did a double take. Of course, nothing there per usual. There was nothing hanging from the rearview mirror, nothing in the dash, literally nothing to trick my eyes into thinking someone was there. Each time, it looked like a Caucasian woman. Aside from my own encounters, my neighbours across the hall have also started seeing black figures in their apartment, hiding behind doors, but most notably, sitting in the bathtub.